What's up, Moto Buddies? Mike here from Taco Moto Co. In this video, we'll show you how to install the Billet oil pump gears, and these are for the 16 through 22 450 Austrian competition bikes, and the 17 through 23 450, 500, 501 Austrian enduro bikes. First step is to remove the coolant. The drain plug is right here on the bottom of the water pump. My technique is to leave the radiator cap on, remove the bolt, and then loosen the cap. Be ready for the sudden flow. Tip your bike over on its side and remove the brake return spring. Remove the bolt and nut that hold on the brake lever. Remove all the bolts that hold on the water pump cover, as well as the engine side case cover, and then the clutch cover, except leave these 3 bolts on the clutch cover. Remove the water pump cover. The 10mm nut that holds the water pump impeller. Take 2 flat blade screwdrivers and very carefully pry up on the impeller. It's plastic, it may break. If your impeller separates into the 2 halves and the bottom half stays onto the shaft, just leave it there. It's difficult to remove and it'll come off with the engine cover. Next, remove all the bolts, and if you want to, you can make a handy little piece of cardboard, and that would be a reference mark where you can take all your bolts, stick them in there so you don't lose track of where they go. Before you pull the side cover off, put your thumb on the water pump impeller shaft and hold it down as you lift and remove the cover. The reason for this is we need to retain the timing marks of the crank output shaft gear, one here and then one up here on the balancer shaft. So at this point, let's take our nut, put it on our engine, and we need to turn that gear until we line these up. This is top dead center, and no matter what we do, we don't want to lose that reference mark. If you lose this reference mark for whatever reason and the gears become out of phase, you'll have to pull the valve cover off and then look at the camshaft and confirm that you've got the engine at top dead center, and then realign the position of these 2 gears. That's a really critical step. Remove the 6 bolts that hold the clutch pressure plate on. If you have a Recluse, they will be Torx bits. If you have an OEM, they will be 8mm. Leave 2 remaining bolts that are at 180 degrees from each other and remove those last, and slowly backing the pressure plate off. Remove the DDS spring. At this point, you can make a quick check of the rubber dampers in your clutch. Notice how much free play there is on these. When we put it all back together, we'll replace these with Recluse dampers. Remove the 6 dowel pins. Slide out the clutch pack. To remove the nut retaining washer, bend the 2 tabs out of the way with the screwdriver and a hammer. To lock the center hub as we remove the nut, you have a few options. You could use a KTM clutch basket tool. You could use some specialty clutch basket locking pliers, or putting your transmission into 6th gear and then using a pry bar carefully under the brake line through the swing arm and then on top of one of the spoke nipples. You can use that as an anchor. When you remove the center hub, note that there is a washer on the back. It may fall off. Be sure to grab it. Pull out the clutch basket. Note that there are 2 bearings. These are the bearings in the race. It's best to leave them on the shaft. Using a set of snap ring pliers, carefully remove the snap ring. Have a magnet ready to grab it as it's released. There's a snap ring and a thrust washer. The driven gear is retained by a C-clip, and that can be removed by a small flat screwdriver or a dental pick. Have your magnet ready for that as well. This has a clip and a thrust washer. Before you pull the bottom gear off, note that there is some letters and writing on the gear. There is a KTM. Best orientation is to put that down at the bottom, and then when you pull up on the driven gear, you'll see that there's a pin, drive pin, located underneath, and that will put the pin on the horizontal. If it's vertical, it may have a tendency to try to slide out and fall down into the engine. Be very careful about that. New driven gear will have a groove in the back, and that will slip right over that drive pin. Make sure it goes all the way in, and make sure with your eye that you can see the locking ring. Give it a few turns to make sure there's resistance. For the idler gear, reach down into the little pocket there. Put some engine oil on the inside of the bore. Make sure everything spins very free. No binding, no issues. Reinstall the thrust washer. Very carefully reinstall the retaining clip. Thrust washer. Take special note of this retaining clip before you reinstall it, that it's not been bent out of shape, that it's held its form really well. If you have any doubt about that, either carefully bend it back or replace it. It's super critical that these snap rings are installed absolutely correctly. Push them down. Make sure they have clicked in and that they're seated. Really bad things will happen if these fall off. Once we've double verified that our oil pump gears are in and our retaining clips are on correctly, and that our balancer shaft and primary gear are set at top dead center, we're replacing the damper bushings in this DDS clutch hub. So we'll push out the center piece. That will expose our dampers. Lift those out to remove. The new dampers go in with the bridge towards the back on the bottom. Centerpiece goes back in. It may take some light tapping to get it all the way seated. The goal is for the two sections to be flush here at the bottom. Install the spacer washer and the hub. The Recluse kit comes with a new lock washer, and note that the tab goes down into this little cavity. Torque the nut to 73 foot-pounds. Clamp the locking tabs. Any stray metal flakes or shavings. Reinstall the 6 drive pins, and note that there's 2 little cavities. They go in the one that has the deeper recession. When you install the clutch frictions, note that they go inside of the groove here that goes all the way down, not the ones that have the curved boss at the end. When you install the clutch plates, note that the first one in has an S on it that goes down. Just a word about clutch plates. Carefully inspect them for any abnormal wearing, bluing, really strong discoloration. If yours have any problems, replace them. Install the throwout rod. There's a dimple on the bottom, cone on the top, dimple goes down. Throwout bearing. The final disc is a steel. It may have stuck here onto the back of the pressure plate. The plate fits all the way down, and the dowels are here inside of these holes. This black metal ring on top of the pressure plate, make sure it's there. The spring retainer has 3 markings, 1, 2, and 3. Each correspond to a different deck height. You'll see that the number 1 is the shortest, 2 is a little taller, and 3 is the taller. When we originally took this off, our screws were all positioned in the number 2 spot. So we'll put that back in, and then we're going to do a test to confirm that if that's the accurate place or not. With the screws tightened down, we'll use a straight edge. We'll place it across the top of the spring and a feeler gauge measuring 0.1 millimeters. We slide that underneath, and if our adjustment is correct, this should not slide in very far at all. Maybe just a tiny bit here at the end is about it, but it does not fit. It doesn't want to go in. I have to force it in there. So that means that our spring is level and flat, and that's correct. If it was misangled, we would just change the screw position from the 2 to something else to try to get that as flat as possible. Before we put the clutch cover back on, make sure to check this gasket, make sure it's on and free of any debris. Look over your part storage area, make sure that everything's been installed, there's nothing left over. Do a final check of your clutch cover, looking for any debris, remove it. Clean the gasket mating surface area. Inspect the face of the water pump shaft, make sure there's no burring, scarring, or any issues with it. Put a little bit of wheel bearing grease inside of the oil seal. Carefully install the engine side cover. Give it a tap or two, make sure that it sits flush. Wipe off any wheel bearing grease. If your water pump came apart, reinstall the 2 halves. Note that there's a locating groove in the pump. Slide it down, push it, and turn it looking for those slots. Once you find it, it'll press in and go all the way and expose all the threads. Apply some medium strength thread locker to the nut. Torque the water pump nut to 6 Newton meters or 52 inch-pounds. Clean the area of the water pump cover, also the inside of the cover. Reinstall the screws, and note that the one on the bottom here has the copper washer. Reinstall all the engine case half screws, and note that this bottom one here specifically has this large copper washer. Absolutely make sure that's on there. If this wasn't on there, the blunt end of this screw would drive into the crankshaft and damage it. Carefully tighten these screws in a star pattern to 10 Newton meters or 88 inch-pounds. Reinstall your brake lever. Final steps of the project are to refill your coolant, check for any missing or loose parts, reinstall skid plate, anything else that's been removed, and when you feel the job is thoroughly complete, go for a test ride. Thanks for using the Moto Billet oil pump gears. If you have any questions about these parts or anything else that we do, hit us up in the comments or send us a message. Our contact information will be in the notes below. Like, subscribe, go out, get some adventure.